I remember it was a song that came out about me with some other rapper. I was already having some success at this point, and he put out, a diss track. Instead of making a song back, a friend of mine tried to kill him, but they thought that, I sent him. Like I was the one who was really behind it. They think if they don't come and kill me, and I'm thinking if I don't go and kill them, so I'm in a kill or be killed situation. And that in itself froze me. That's what really brought me back to religion. I wanted to know more about God, and I got very obsessed with this. And I started spending maybe 8 hours a day going through all these different texts, or the Quran, and I was going through the Chumash and the JPS Tanakh. I was going on 3-day water fast, praying, just trying to find the truth. The obvious question, why are you doing this? And that's one thing that's hard for a lot of people. Like they don't realize that Judaism, we don't believe you have to be Jewish in order to have a place in the world to come or in heaven or anything. You can be completely righteous non-Jew. So the question is, why are you doing this?
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of The Proctor Effect on Moral Edge. Today, I was joined by none other than my partner, Nissim Black, one of the guests here on Moral Edge, who also has his own show called The Nissim Black Show. And the discussion today was all about his life, from his early years growing up in Seattle to finally making it to Israel, and what it was like transitioning from that world to the Jewish world, from the music to everything else that comes with it. It was a phenomenal conversation. And without further ado, it's time to listen to my episode with myself and Nissim Black. Enjoy. Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of The Proctor Effect. I'm beyond excited for the guest that I have in front of me because of two reasons. Number one, I've been a tremendous admirer of yours for years. I've seen your stories. I've heard about it. And that's why, obviously, I'm excited to have you on the episode today to just give the audience and myself a better understanding of who Nissim Black is. But then on top of that, number two, for those that have been watching the content of The Moral Edge, you could see that Nissim and I, we're on the same team now. But, thank God we're trying to represent the Jewish people and do a lot of amazing things with The Moral Edge. So if you haven't checked out the Nissim Black Show, I'm plugging it early. Check it out. so I just want to jump right into our conversation for today. Mm-hmm. There is so much we could touch on about your life, and you have so many experiences. You've done so much, but I want to take back to the beginning. Mm-hmm. You have a very interesting beginning childhood life story. So take me through the first about 10, 15 years of your life, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. We'll try to do this in a manageable amount of time. I was born in Seattle, Washington, which for in recent years, I've become very embarrassed about that. For many reasons.
Why?
Started with Corona. I mean, they tried to take over and become its own entity, its own country, and whatever, the homelessness, all this other stuff. But now that the Seahawks are actually in the Super Bowl again, right? Which I tried, by the way. I'm sorry to get off in this tangent. I tried really to disconnect from Seattle completely, and I couldn't. I love the Seahawks too much. I love Seattle sports.
By the way, by the time we put out this episode, I hate to interject, but by the time this comes out, then we'll know if they won or not.
We'll know if they won or not. We'll know if they won or not. So anyway, I'm from Seattle. Football was very dear to me. Music was very dear to me. Both my mother and my father were both drug dealers. I often joke and say, like any good Jewish boy, I joined the family business very early. 9, I was already smoking pot. I started running with street gangs. I mean, I think we had already started gangs, and that's what's so interesting. The aspirations that we had as a kid was like, at 8 years old was like, let's start our own gang. You know what I'm saying? Like when you grow up around and you see that type of violence, hearing gunshots every night, and the people that you have to look up to are in gang activity, that's like what you aspire to. And I'm saying that now because I'm just thinking about it, like of how interesting that is. Like as a kid, like, there was a period where I also wanted to be, a Power Ranger, and I also wanted to be a gangster. Like, so, that was just sort of like, the influence of those things that go on in your life. So seeing that, growing up with a lot of violence and being battle ran by the FBI, because of the business that my parents were in, it sort of just led me down this path of, becoming a product of my environment. Now, what I will say though, my biological father and my mother split when I was 2. So I had a stepfather who basically raised me, who I don't refer to him as a stepfather. He's my dad. He took care of me, raised me, and I also have an awesome and loving relationship with my biological father. So, but because of, the way that I grew up, and still having 2 parents at home, that's another thing that I'm looking at now, that I still had a father figure in my life. Things weren't as bad as my family members or friends that didn't have that. So as I got older, and what I appreciate, at least about my parents, as hypocritical as it sounds, they didn't want that type of life for me. And so I was held to a certain higher standard, but I was exposed to so much, right? And so my mother and my father recognized around 13, I was getting into a lot of trouble. I was expelled from the school district already by this time for, running with the wrong people and being all the wrong places at the wrong time. All the while, though, I was very spiritual. I was a very deep kid. I was really into the idea of God. I felt this connection to him, even though I didn't necessarily have it all the way defined. My grandfather introduced me to Islam at around either 8, 9 years old. He moved in with us. My grandfather spent most of his time in prison, but he moved in with us, taught me Islam. I prayed with him 5 times a day in Arabic. He taught me Arabic, taking me to the mosque with him on Fridays. And unfortunately, after him violating his parole, he ended up back in prison. So I would have said I was a Muslim, but I wasn't really religious. And so getting back to that, 13 years old, that was like a crucial time in my life, because after being expelled and running with the wrong people, that was the first time I got arrested. Also, too, I was 13 years old. My house burnt down that year. Literally, we watched our house go up in flames. And my parents recognized my talent and was like, we got to keep him busy. They hired a producer to basically be like a big brother to me. He actually genuinely thought I was talented. So he produced my first 2 songs. I had a friend that invited me to go to this hip hop program that was at this, it was like a Christian organization. And they were very keen on getting kids off of the streets and getting them, into productive activities. So they had this hip hop program. So I go there, and I'm in my safe haven at this point now. I've built relationships, and what was so good about this place, which I think that unfortunately in the inner city we don't do enough. People talk about rehabilitation and different things like that. Like, we don't do enough to give kids the proper exposure outside of things in the environment, because what happens is you get really stuck, right? So what most people do in these type of situations, when they want to help inner city kids, they go and find other people who supposedly have been rehabilitated, probably had criminal backgrounds, and they come back into those neighborhoods to try to be examples. Now, people don't understand how much it takes to really change your life and to become a different person. A lot of times I find that actually not to be successful, as opposed to what happened for whatever reason during this certain season or period of time. This organization in particular had a lot of kids who were coming from like suburban white areas that were wanting to help inner city kids. And so because of that exposure to, a different way of life, a different way of thinking, that was actually more impactful for me. So I ended up going with them to a camp. It was like a missionary camp. The name of the organization was Young Life. And I remember going there, and it was the most amazing summer I had ever before. Because when you grow up in the type of environment that I grew up in, you have the drugs, the fast moving. Like, my house was a drug house. Like, wow. That was, things I woke up seeing, kilos of dope on the table and garbage bags full of marijuana. It was criminal. They would come home from gunfights with bullets in their leg and stuff like that. So I seen these things growing up, and so just like the movies, by the way. Literally like the movies. And so that environment, and then being exposed to a different environment, or having that summer where I was able to just go be a kid, and just, that was all it was about. And then to also have the spiritual component, although it was, it was Christianity at that time, but that's probably why today shaped me so much, where I'm very, even though I stand here as an Orthodox Jew, why I'm Christian soft, I guess they would tell me, because it saved my life. I have a certain, what we would say a certain gratitude for especially those people that were in my life at that time. It was crucial. Saved my life, that camp. So I was converted to Christianity then, came back, and I had a letter in the mail allowing me to go to a regular public school. So I went in to go into high school and to restart my life, basically. And it was an awesome experience, and I was very involved in the Bible. Loved the Bible. I was a Bible thumping kid. I should have been doing homework, but I wasn't doing homework. I was reading my Bible more than anything else. And then I think it was like maybe around my 11th to 12th grade year, a demo of mine made it to the desk of an A&R at a record label. And that was a very, very, like, it was my dream. Music was my love up until that point. I was still making music, putting out mixtapes. It was more positive then because I was a pretty Bible thumping Christian. I was very involved. I was in outreach. I had more than half of the high school kids going to all the different Bible studies and programs. And so by that time, it was sort of like, okay, music is my thing. But by the time that this demo makes it to the A&R, and I'm like, wow, it's like my reward, you know what I'm saying, for being a good kid all this time. And like now I'm about to, and then of course the biggest thing in hip hop at the time was a guy by the name of 50 Cent. And 50 Cent has sort of changed the trajectory of the rap game at the time that he was. And so long story short, they wanted gangster music and I caved in thinking that it would just be a persona, but I wouldn't change my values. And slowly but surely everything started to change. And that in the midst of, that deal situation that I had, I ended up losing my mother. My mother died of an overdose. And so that kind of put me in a different place. And I drowned myself at that point in music because I didn't want to have to think about the pain that I felt when I lost her. And so I remember I think it was maybe February, March. It was a song that came out about me with some other rapper. I was already having some success at this point. And he put out, a diss track. And so instead of making a song back, we actually just went and found him and got in a physical altercation. And a friend of mine tried to kill him, but they thought that, I sent him, like I was the one who was really behind it. And so he goes into custody. But now the problem, they think if they don't come and kill me, then it's, and I'm thinking if I don't go and kill them, then, and so I'm in a kill or be killed situation. Wow. And that in itself froze me. That's what really brought me back to religion. And if just to highlight a little bit of, how much I was really into it. Like I used to close myself in my room, 15, 16 years old, and talk to God for hours. Like I was already really into what it's today I know is Heat Bududut or self-seclusion with God and speaking to him. But back then I didn't know. I gravitated towards prayer very, very early. And so for me, it was very important for me to restable myself after that situation of getting into that altercation. And I prayed and I remember falling to my knees. And after a while, I just cried. And it was a cry really of surrendering. Like, God, I don't, I don't got this thing figured out. Like, I thought I was going to get this. I was going to have this deal. The label ended up pulling out on me. I lost my mother. I had so many different things. My life, I've always been to that like peak of like, oh, wow, it's about to happen. And then something happens to deter me from that. Mm-hmm. Now, so far in my life, in retrospect, when I look back, I go, thank you, Hashem. Like, thank you, God, so much that this, you know what I mean? Like you stopped that thing from happening because I could see now it may not have been good for me at that time in my life. And so after this, praying, going back and forth, I finally got a call from this other guy. We talked it out. We hung up the phone. And when I knew that the coast was clear, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going back to the same life. And so I went on this journey after that of self-discovery, spending many hours praying, talking to God, which led me to, want to, I guess, question my faith at that time. Not because necessarily I had problems at the time with Christianity. I really didn't. I just really wanted to know. I wanted to know more about God. So I started reading the Bible from cover to cover, started ordering, many different books. I started to watch debates between rabbis and pastors and imams and everything else. And I got very obsessed with this. And I started spending maybe 8 hours a day going through all these different texts, or the Quran, and I was going through Jewish, the Chumash and the JPS Tanakh.
I'm actually going to interject. I'm going to ask a question on that. Is that you're not like a typical high school kid, or that at that age you're what, 17,
So
18?
by this time that I was doing all of this, I was 20. So this is just right after high school. I had everything going on. So by the time I started sitting down to search, really, I was 20 years old.
What did most of the people that were your friends, what did they think? Like, what in the world are you doing? Where'd you go?
You know what? Nobody knew because we weren't around anybody. After I got in that situation with the other artists, I realized that I had to change my environment completely. Like I was at least aware enough to know that I needed to be in a completely different environment. And technically I was like still living in the hood, you know. I may even been more in the hood.
Wow.
You know, the complex that I stayed in. I was just talking to my sister the other day. She was just like, you know, because she was looking for a new place. And so I suggested the old complex that I used to live at. She just like, you may not make it in or out of there. You know, like this place was like, you know, it was the hood. And so, but for me, you know, it was a world of holiness and godly, like in my space, because I was barely going out. So I was like literally 8 hours a day doing that. I started fasting. I was going on 3-day water fast, praying, of just completely spending hours and hours before God, just trying to find the truth. I didn't know what was what, right? I was just genuinely trying to get closer to God. That was really what I was trying to do. And so eventually that journey, you know, to not take us all day, but it led me to go on a journey where I ended up joining a Messianic congregation. So I was there for a little bit, for about 2 years, which that ended up leading me to Orthodox Judaism, obviously where I am today. And about, I want to say, almost more than like 16 years ago, my family and I had moved into a Jewish community, and then we converted around 13 years ago. And then I was in the community for about 2 years. It was me and my wife. My wife's sister was dating my best friend, who's been my best friend since I was in kindergarten. I had two childhood best friends I was very, very close to. So he's like my brother from another. So we married sisters. Wow. We all converted together, same day. And then, about 10 years ago, we moved to Israel, where we live today. So,
okay, first of all, I think
it's the shortest part of I can ever give you.
No, you really did great. And I want to touch on a few points. And I think that, you know, what I'm sure a lot of people are curious about is, you know, to become an Orthodox Jew is very complicated. There's a lot of things that go into it. And on a surface level, like I remember I saw an interview with Amari Stoudemire, Yehoshvat, good friend of yours. Yeah. And I think he said one of the most intimidating moments of his life was not when he was in front of the Madison Square Garden in front of 20, 30,000 people. It was when he sat in front of the Beit Din, which are like the big rabbis with big beards and hats in Bnei Brak. And he had to basically get tested to say, like, are you ready to become an Orthodox Jew? You were there.
I was there. I was sitting right next to him at the time. I was there. I went as a friend, as support, as somebody. So I was there. And I know how intimidated he was.
Really? First of all, I'm impressed that you happen to have been there and you could actually attest to that one. But
it's experience. And I listen, I've been there for myself. That there is, I can't say I was at that state of nervousness for myself just because I'd already been in one particular community for about 2.5 years. Rabbi Farkash, who was the first rabbi I went to, Chabad rabbi in Bellevue. He's the first rabbi I went to. He was on the Beit Din. So I was very familiar with him. He's the one who sent me to Seward Park, which was the neighborhood I actually grew up in. I grew up in the Jewish neighborhood, actually. So he sent me back over there where I met Rabbi Ben Zaken, who was my rabbi, sponsor rabbi. He became like a father to me. And so he was also on the Beit Din. Rabbi Maimon, who I would learn Chokla Yisrael, Alav Shalom. He was a holy man. He was also on the Beit Din. So I had that comfort of knowing the rabbis. It's a little bit different than like being in Bnei Brak and you're sponsoring rabbi. I think it's Rabbi Mantelan took him from Or Sameach there, where you're sitting in front of these guys you never met before. I find that much more intimidating. So I totally understand where he's coming from. They don't know you from hey, they're here to just test you. Rabbi Kletinik, Rabbi Leviton, Rabbi Cornfield, Rabbi Meir, that were on my Beit Din. Like all these people watch me grow over the last 2.5 years. This one, I've been in their shul for simchas and I was there. And so for me, I didn't really necessarily have such intimidation, but it's scary. It didn't take it completely away. It just like I had a little bit less. So I felt a little bit more compelled. What was more scary for me, sitting in front of a Beit Din, a court of rabbis, you should say, is that you don't know what they're going to ask you.
That's what
so you've been preparing for that moment for a very long time, right? And you're trying to learn as much of the technical laws and everything else because, you know, that's just what you're told you're going to be asked. We sat in on that Beit Din. They didn't ask us anything. I maybe got one question on Jewish law. That was it. The rest of it was testing the heart.
Testing
the heart. Yeah. things like if you were a stranger, you couldn't live in the community, what would you do? Like, the obvious question, why are you doing this? You could be just as righteous. Judaism, and that's one thing that's hard for a lot of people. Like, they don't realize that Judaism, probably one of the only religions, for sure, out of the three, right? The three Abrahamic religions, that we don't believe you have to be Jewish in order to have a place in the world to come or in heaven or anything. You could be completely righteous non-Jew. So the question is, why are you doing this? You know what I'm saying? These type of things. What is making you be compelled to do this? You're already a good person, obviously. You love the God of Israel already. So why would you take upon yourself to, take on commandments that weren't given to you? Why would you do that? So these type of questions was what's much deeper. Ask me what I was learning. So I think I had mentioned at the time I was learning the book Nissim Shalom. At the time, with my Rebbe, I was in that year, and then I was also learning Gemara, Baba Metzia at that time. So I think my brother-in-law mentioned at one time, because they brought in both families. So he starts arguing, going back and forth with one of the rabbis about Baba Metzia. We started talking about lost objects. So now they're going back and forth in this rock. And one of the rabbis said, Rabbi, he's right. So it started turning into like, to a little Gemara sparring, I would say, Shaklavataria. So then the other rabbi asked me another question. And because I had mentioned that I was learning the Nissim Shalom about Emunah and Bitachon, faith versus trust. So then we started arguing back and forth about faith versus trust. What is what? And so you have this, it was like a beautiful dynamic. And at the end of it, it just was a genuine, okay, these guys are very sincere. And you felt that, okay. And I felt that debate in itself, they were very proud of us. And like I said, probably they've been watching us over the last couple of years or so.
So for the people that listen to this and myself, because I've never seen a conversion happen.
Yeah, you never seen it happen.
Take us through. So you go in, you meet the rabbis, they test you, and really, as you're saying, they're testing your heart to kind of see where you're at.
Right.
What happens as soon as you leave that room? Do they be like, okay, you're now Jewish? Like, what? Take us through what practically happens.
So usually there's several meetings that take place. In some places there's 2-3 meetings. I don't know if there's an actual official number. The first thing is getting a rabbi to listen to you in the first place about conversion. And that's what a lot of people, they think like they could just send an email to the local rabbi and just say, Rabbi, my God's put it on my heart, that I want to convert. And that will get you nowhere. You may never get answered, right? So it's going and being in that environment. And I remember when we first went, I think the first time I went, the community was on Simchas Torah. Right. So a celebration of the Torah. And I remember going there and it was joyful and everything like that. Met the rabbi, whatever. So just in passing, just whatever. And then so when I started showing up every day for, the daily prayers and I would ask the rabbi, can we, yeah, we'll talk. It was sort of like brushing you off. And so most people don't know, you have to be rejected first in Judaism. It just is what it is. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from or whatever. The idea is to not push. First off, because you don't need to. There's nobody that, Judaism doesn't require the world to have redemption, as I said, because they convert or not. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is you need to test to see if people are genuine, if it's true. It's a lot. Judaism is a lot to take on if a person, from the outside in, you can get very excited about things. It's not the same as, other faiths. There's what to do. So I was pushed off for a while. And,
was that hard for you, by the way? Were you confused? Like, why is this rabbi not taking me in?
I think because I at least knew that it was going to happen. He at least did it in a graceful way. Like, it wasn't like, oh, this isn't for you. Some people had got the whole speech, that's not for you, whatever, and you have to keep pushing. So I wasn't so put off on it. And I had friends that were there that encouraged me, who had already went through the process. Other people I met already in that time in the community told me just keep showing up. And that's what we did. And so eventually Rabbi said, okay, let's meet. And when I finally met with him, his big thing was so then I'm finally thinking wow, I could tell him, my whole experience or whatever the case is. Sat down, told him a little bit in 5 minutes. I said, where do you live? I told him where I lived. He said, so you're not in the community yet? I said, nah, this Rabbi Benzakin. He was so sweet. So he says, okay, when you move into community, then we'll talk again. That's it. Bye.
Wow.
So it's like, well, I got to move in. Now, anybody knows. And I would be very hard pressed to find any area that is highly populated with Orthodox Jews, it's a cheap place to live, right? I just don't think it exists, right? So we look at a place, the property value goes up. So we had to we by way of miracle, we made it work. There was a family. Shout out to the Dam family who lived in the neighborhood, who had a house, and they rented their place to me and my brother and sister-in-law. So it was one big house. We took the upstairs, shared the kitchen. They took the downstairs, and that's how we made it work throughout the conversion process. At least before we, split and got our own places.
So once you went through the final conversion process, now you know you're Jewish. You were with your wife before then. So then do you have to get remarried according to the Jewish law?
Yeah.
And then what goes on? Take me through
That's
that.
the most awkward thing ever. So me and my wife been together since we were 16. So I met my wife in high school, actually. My 10th grade year going into my 11th grade year is when I met my wife. So, and she was a year older. So went to my prom first, then to her prom, then her prom first, and then my prom the next year. So for us, it was even more weird. Like we've been together since we were kids. You know what I mean? So yes, we originally got married before 2008. That was when we originally got married. So we had already dating since 2004, whatever, around there, since 2004, 2003, whatever. And so 2008 is when we officially got married. So at some point when my wife, of us going through our journey and learning together and, getting more inspired as we were, and I was growing and she was growing, and my brother and sister-in-law, it was all of us together. And my wife had realized, and I think we were still at the Messianic congregation at this time, but she wanted authentic Judaism. We were learning down that path already. We were spending a lot of time learning Jewish law and different things like that. Spent a lot of time on Chabad.org. Chabad.org was very big for us. I was a big Mendel Kaplan fan. I used to watch a lot of his Rabbi Gordon, who was Oliver Shalom. It was amazing. Gave a Parsha class. So I used to watch Chabad.org a lot. And so that gave me this appetite, for Judaism. And so my wife came to me one day and was like, I want to convert. We should really do it. Now it was interesting because I was the one more into everything, I guess externally. Internally, she was really taking to it. And so I was excited about that, but I'm just like, how are we going to do it? I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. I never seen black Jews. I seen Jews in black. I never seen black ones. So it was interesting. And then so I'm telling you, the divine providence of God happened that I was in a grocery store and I was doing self-checkout. And in between the beep, I heard, Shabbat Shalom, brother. I turn around, this black Jewish guy standing up, Yaakov London is his name. I call him Uncle Yaakov today. And he invited us for Shabbat, for Sabbath meal. So I went to him, and then I went with him the next week. And then somebody else met me in the community, and then somebody else invited me. And so that was really what got our thing going. So, fast forwarding to conversion and finishing, right after we converted, it's the weirdest part because you become a new creature. You're something brand new, right? And so you're not technically married anymore. So you got to get remarried, So it's always a risk, You better hope you were a good husband before. Hope she marry you again, right? So what happened is thank God I didn't have to repropose. But we already had 2 kids, so it was like, all right, so we gotta do this. But the weirdest part was in between the conversion and the wedding, I had to treat her like some lady. I couldn't touch her. Wow. I couldn't be in a home with her by myself. I had to stay by somebody else's house. Same thing with my brother-in-law. Stay by another good friend of ours. And if I went home, I needed something from the house to leave the door open, make sure people knew that I was there to go. And I kind of had to treat my wife, not necessarily like a stranger, but we couldn't kick it. You know what I'm saying?
A good friend.
Yeah, good friend. And so, but what's so interesting about that is that we got married, community got together, put together a beautiful, beautiful wedding for us. And what's so interesting about it is that wedding, and I remember that day, I felt like literally me and my wife were brand new. I literally felt like I just married her. It was the first time I ever met this woman. It was brand new. It was an interesting feeling that came about out of that. Spiritually, you could feel it. It was a spiritual energy that was there. And shout out to Zach, our producer, who who rapped Zorba rapped at my wedding, by the way. Just throwing that out there. He's behind the cameras now, but he rapped at my wedding. The black and brown wedding. So that was really that experience of like remarrying your soulmate. And what's interesting was I expected that sooner. My father, who, my father who changed his life, by the way. I should always say that. I always tell the gloomy part of the story, never tell, my father, my biological father, he changed his life also. Like I said, was in the drug game, went to prison, came out, during that time, I think he went to seminary over there, like Male Seminary for Christianity, became a professor, theologian, what he is today, pastors a church. And it's an ironic thing. He went from, being a drug dealer to being the head of an addiction program. I mean, you talk about seeing how God can change and transform a person. So not only was he there at the wedding, and that was an awesome experience to have him there. The other thing is, the reason why I bring him up, I have to think about why I brought him up.
Well, you'll cut this part out, but I was going to say, like, could I ask you, like, he's a Christian pastor kind of, and you're Jewish. Like, what in the world is that?
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there after this one. I brought him up because, okay. Let me know when you're ready, Yitz. He himself told me, and I was really looking for it. They said, once you get married, he said, you're going to feel a different connection to your wife that you didn't feel before. And so I was expecting that. So he married us the first time, and it was nice. We only had 2 other witnesses there, and we had the plan that we'll make a bigger wedding. We did not know at the time we were going to convert. We just said, we'll make a bigger wedding next time. It was like, and we genuinely thought, we'll save up money and whatever, but the right thing to do is for us to be married and to do it the right way, whatever the case is, was our thoughts at the time. And so afterwards, I just felt like we just went through a ceremony and that was it and whatever. And it was nice. But after we got remarried, like for real, like when we had a Jewish wedding, it was a completely different thing. That spiritual connection, like I literally like, wow, this is my Kala, like, like I didn't know her since I was 16 years old. Wow. And it was a magical and wonderful experience.
It's so special because I think, for people that are listening to this that might not necessarily be from the Jewish community, there's a lot that goes into leading up to a wedding. As you were saying before, like you were with your wife before, you knew her your whole life. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, you're separated and then you get remarried again. But I think it's such a beautiful point that you're touching on. Like you're creating yourself again, right? And like, obviously in Judaism, we say every single day you're creating yourself anew, but especially there, like you had your entire life and everything that went up to it. And now it's like, you get a fresh start and it's like, it's a beautiful thing. And my next, thought on is like, you just mentioned your dad, like he literally changed his life around. He took a complete 180, went from selling pot to now being a Christian, pastor and running a whole amazing organization, giving back to the community and you're Jewish and you're his son. So talk to me about that. Like, what's that dynamic like? Was he supportive of the decision of you to become Jewish? And how's that dynamic now? Now,
so in all fairness, I think he much more prefer if I was a Christian, right? So I don't think that's I don't think that's telling of like where he holds, at least religiously. However, one of the places where we really connected was he and I both love God. Both love the Bible, and both love Israel. Jewish people, he's conservative, and I think more than anything else was that the similar life pattern of changing our lives, right, is what really bound us together, and we really connected over that. So, like as he's showing up, I don't think he was like trying to give an overarching, I guess they say approval of. Me converting to Orthodox Judaism, but in a very respectful way. Like he was there, he showed up, he would come visit us and whatever. But at the same time, like we've never got into like a feud or anything like that about it because it's like what matters the most is my dad. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so, and where I think I'm a lot like him in the sense of, I don't find him to be a confrontational person also too. I've become more controversial and confrontational as I've grown, but I think like my core of my person is like not one of controversy. So I think he and I really connect over the point of seeing the power of God in people's life and transforming them. And so since he was transformed in his way, I was transforming my way. I think that's where we really, really connect at. So, and I'm proud. I always say he's one of my favorite people in the world. to see that transformation that he has, and I've seen him do his thing. I've seen him preach. I've seen him, and to see that turnaround in his life, like I look at that also as the power of God. Okay, so we have differences in the way that we believe, and that's okay. That's totally fine. However, to say that it's not God who changed his life or changed my life, that would be a complete farce, right? So I think that we really connect over that. But he's an amazing person.
Honestly, I think that's really special for a lot of people that might be listening to this that don't have the best relationship with their child because of the differences that they see. Hopefully, they can look at this and say, you know what? Despite a big foundational thing in your life, which is the way you live your life, because you're Christian, he's Christian, and you're Jewish.
Right.
It's something that you can still find those common grounds to bond on each other.
Right.
Now, I want to take a little bit of a pivot in this conversation. I think that's what's so cool about your journey. Obviously, we kind of went up to how you became Jewish, but the beginning of your life, you really got into music, and that was something you connected to, and you had an entire persona in the non-Jewish music world. So once you converted and got into Judaism, how did you essentially find your way back to music in a way where you're able to mix your Judaism and music together? What was that like for you?
It's good. So I right before the conversion, I actually retired from. I finally hit that mountain peak for me. I was on a very big compilation by the Jake One White Van Music, and so I was getting good radio play, DJ Premier. There was like big names, legends in hip hop that started to really give me a nod. And then I followed up with what I thought at that time was my last album, my Aliyah album, and in the process of in between me beginning and finishing that album and finally going out to promote it or whatever, in between there is when it's okay, I'm converting to Judaism happened. So I kind of started off with messages that by the time I was out promoting, I probably would have took back some of the things that I said inside of that, meaning that it was all positive album, but I'm just saying religiously I'd shifted during the time of that album. So, but I was out, promoting it. And I thought that was my last album. I didn't take a single dime from it. I told my business partner, my manager at the time, I was like, listen, I'm out after this album. You guys keep everything. Only thing I want is I don't want to perform on the Shabbat or the holidays. And so they were like, you sure you want that? I'm like, yeah, I'm cool, whatever. Album ends up blowing up. I'm on MTV, BET, and the beating out massive big names in college radio at that time. This is when the College Music Journal was still a big thing. Went there, headlined this Sasquatch, and then also, which is a big festival, also in where's it in Austin, South by Southwest. So it was wow, I'm finally at that place. I remember being in a room, I was in New York. It was in this back room in between gigs or whatever, and I'm sitting there with some of my favorite rappers that I listen to, whatever, and they're they want to meet me. Wow. And they knew me by name and everything. So, and I'd always thought at that time when I got to that point, you fantasize that as a kid, and the love that I had for God and the pursuit that I had for righteousness, was so strong inside my heart. It didn't even matter to me. I met these people. It was nothing to me. And it was just a testament to how much, if you, the amount of work and time I was putting into my spiritual growth and the things that I thought would matter didn't matter by the time they actually happened. And so I retired, did my last retirement show and all this other stuff. And, they kept on blinging me, put out this one last thing, just do this one last thing, until finally I shut it down, officially started my conversion. So I told you some of the story. This is when I was in that process. And then at some point, there were people in my community, shout out to Uncle Rick. He was one of the people that kind of found out that I did music before. I was like, hey, you have a talent, you should do it. Then Rabbi Benzikin, who also is like, hey, God gave you something, you got to do it. So I started getting people in the community starting out hey, listen, you can't and I'm like, trust me, I'm fine. You know what I mean? I'm good. I just couldn't make it work in my head religiously. I didn't want to lose my religiosity, basically.
So you didn't want to be a rapper when also being a religious
Yeah, I didn't want to be a rapper and also be religious. It wasn't that I didn't want to. It's just I didn't feel that it worked. I felt that the antithesis. Sorry,
exactly.
To Judaism and the humility, everything that I was learning was rap music. Because I always say this: that even a positive rapper, usually, who we would call a positive, they at least rap about how much better they are than somebody else, right? So that's I'm saying that's as you get. So in itself, it's an arrogant sport. That's what I always thought. So I thought the place where I was trying to go is I thought rap just didn't jive with it at that time. So I focused more on my spirituality. And then, I started to get crazy things happening. Friends calling me out the blue. Oh, I had a dream of this. And then my wife, and then my best friend. And then I started to get, okay. And all the while, Matisyahu, who happens to be a really good guy, was having his public struggle at that time. And that was just like proof for me. I was like, hey, listen, Modest is going through his thing right now. And that's proof for me. The two can work. I'm not going back. And my son got sick with meningitis. And I, at that time, was very close to the books of Rabbi Arush. I still read his stuff today. Almost every night I still read at least one Rabbi Arush book. But he was really big on prayer, which is why I gravitated to him. That was my thing also. But he talked about when you really need a salvation from God, you should pray for 6 hours straight, like fall on your face before God 6 hours straight. So my son was sick. My back was against the wall. We were enduring all type of financial difficulty. I prayed 6 hours straight. And during that time, I hit a certain meditation and things started to come back to me. Dreams, visions I had when I was a kid and, music. And then I started putting together all these things that people were saying to me. And I felt like, what if I am running from what God wants me to do? Like, what if I'm just And so I had this broken microphone. I said to God, I said, listen, this Rode NT2, I don't know how to short it. The microphone didn't work. I plugged it up many times. It didn't work. But I kept it, at that time it was like a big deal. Now I'll throw the thing away. But I kept it now because of the story. I still have this microphone. Because of this story, I kept it. And I prayed to God. And I said, God, if this is what you want me to do, if this is coming from you, microphone has to work. I plugged it up. It worked. And that's why I usually joke and say, God, never mind, it already works. But afterwards, I went to my Rebbe. I was really close to Rabbi Shmuel Brody, who's in Seattle. He's now in Baltimore now. And I'm telling you, he changed my life so much just to see him. I was on fire for Judaism. One of the toughest things to do as a convert hopeful is to move into a Jewish community and see how unexcited everybody else is about you. They grew up that way. So for them, it's like, I've been there. It's not really anything excited. But once you have read the Bible and you've read the love that God has for the Jewish people and you get so excited about Torah and everything else, over there, you're like, okay, why nobody else is excited as me? Rabbi Brody had that excitement like a kid, right? His excitement and his love for God was so infectious and contagious, for me and from my brother-in-law, I would say. So I went to him because I felt like I would get really good guidance from him. And he was reluctant, but he sat with me for like 2 hours straight. Like we talked it out. He gave me a lot of what we call musar, some ethics.
Rebuke. Nicely rebuked.
No, it wasn't rebuke. He was just being very strong about the pitfalls, what to watch out for, you came from and everything else. And we talked it out. And then he gave me a blessing. I was also close to Rabbi Lazer Brody, who was here in Ashdod. He was the English voice for Rabbi Arush at that time. And I sort of reached out to him around the same time, just letting him know. And he said, you know what? He'd like to hear some music from me or whatever. So I don't know. I recorded something. I sent it to him. He wrote me back in all caps. He says, you absolutely must do this. And I'm like, what do I do? But that's the hardest part, was going back to music, because I didn't know what to do. I only knew it in the secular world. I didn't even know Jews listen to music. No, I'm joking. But I didn't really know it was like a thing. So I tiptoed back into it because I was so afraid of being like, going into the world of like arrogance and rap music. Like I was so afraid, I was like, do I promote myself? I don't want to. That sounds arrogant. I was like really on some really silly things. Rabbi Brody actually helped me a lot. I remember what he told me, and it's helped me all the way to my career now. And I told him I was really struggling with this. Like, what do I do? Like, I'm supposed to put yourself out there, but then I don't want to put myself out there because I feel like I'm a bald guy. I feel like an arrogant person. What am I going to? So he said to me, he says, listen, if God gave you something to do, you do it 100%. You go full speed. He says, you make your accounting afterwards if you did it the right way. You know what I'm saying? If you went about it the right way, he said, but make it count. He says, but when you have something to do, you do it. Don't tiptoe into anything. You go full speed. And so in the midst of that, time it went by, and then I went back into this place again of just falling so in love with God. I'm like, God, I don't have time for music. I don't want to make music again. And a friend of mine called me. His name is Elon Cohen. We become friends. Our stories went out on H.com around the same time. He had a crazy story about leaving Atlantic. He found Lady Gaga. He discovered her. And then he went to Israel on a birthright trip and says, never mind, I want God. I'm done. And she blows up that year. It was a crazy story. And then my crazy story. And so because of that, we were connected. He called me and was like, listen, he's working on some music stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, send me tracks. And eventually he called me one day and was like, have you ever heard the song of Hashem Melech? God is King, God is King by Gad Elbaz. It's like, yeah. He said, would you do a remix with him? I said, sure, I'll do it. So he hung up with me, called me back 5 minutes. He said, I just got off the phone with Gad Elbaz. He says, they're going to send you the tracks. Let's do it. So that was really how it happened. I ended up recording that song. I had a good friend of mine, Ruby. I had him remix it. And then we sent it back to them. They were in love with it. I was still struggling with the song only because, which is like probably a lot of people's favorite part, was like when the rap breaks down into trap beat. I was just like, no, don't do it. You're like trying to take me back. You know what I'm saying? And everybody vetoed me. Nobody listened to me. God is mad. I was just like, I don't want the trap beat. I want it to be straight up, pumping music, and let's just, don't make it a rap section. So whatever the case is, they did. And the song comes out and it goes like number 3 on the world charts. And it was like, it blew up. And so from then I realized, okay, all right, God. All right, this is really what you wanted me to do. So I figured it out somewhere even deeper into the process of that song, really, that it was what I was supposed to do. And so I always say that you make music that reflects where you are in that time. If you're a real person, right? It usually reflects where you are in your life at that time. And so that's where I was, and so it launch padded my career back into music. Obviously not the way that I thought, because I was only used to a particular world. But since then, I've been running around inspiring people. And I prayed a lot for it. I was spending a lot of time up until that song came out. I told you about that 6 hours. I was praying with God every day for 6 hours, even on the Sabbath, for 22 days straight, up until that song came out. I was in such a crazy situation, just in every other way. Financially, kids were sick. It was like a crazy thing. And it wasn't so much about the song. I just wanted to be used by God. I wanted to be a vessel for him. And I felt and started to recognize my talents and my strengths. And I felt like I needed to pray to be ready for a mission. I didn't know what that mission was going to be. And when that song came out, it became very, very apparent and clear for me.
What's so unique, I think, about you and your situation is if people are realizing from the stories that you have like this very strong willpower that like when you want to get something done, you're going to do it, which I think is, I respect it a lot. And I think a lot of people could hopefully take a little inspiration from it, that, at the end of the day, when you have a lot of things going on in your life, no matter what faith you are, sometimes you just got to look up and be like, give me a little help, lower your string and I'll grab onto it. And I think that, clearly for yourself, that's what you wanted for so long. You wanted God to assist you, and you got that essentially. And after that, that song went out, is that when you realize like, that's it? Like I'm gonna milk this as much as I can? Yeah.
I went forward in the sense of like, okay, that was the green light. God's like, okay, go now. And I went and I recorded a whole album. I think that was maybe a month and a half, or a month, maybe a little bit more than a month before I moved to Israel. So I completely had no idea, completely oblivious to how quote unquote famous I was. They like playing the song in the airport when I landed here in Israel, and there were reporters coming down. I'm just like, it was like I was walking down the street, people stopping me. Like, so I wasn't prepared even for the quote unquote fame that came along with it, which came with a lot of responsibility, and that's the toughest part. You're always looked at under the microscope also too, after that. So, led to me releasing my album Lamala, and then the ups and downs of trying to, have a music career, and at the same time, this public figure, and then also balancing your private life, and then having more children, being a father, being a husband, and then being a person to the community that everybody, you sort of got like, everybody has, the best version of you, that they want to see. But it's usually the image they created in their own likeness. You know what I'm saying? So
to that point of walking around and being somebody, now you go from moving to Israel and you never expected to be this guy that's, you're Nissim, right?
Right.
And then moving into the community that you did and still producing the music. Did you ever have any like negative pushback from the community? Was it ever like, did you ever get any of that from people?
So there was a time where I was completely oblivious to it. They didn't recognize it. People told me it exists, but I didn't believe it because I never experienced it face to face. And then there was one particular time where there are some boys outside who they enjoy my music, but there's a particular rabbi, very holy and righteous rabbi that I would say very openly, he's very righteous, told them they weren't allowed to listen. And so they, I guess the conversation was because they wanted me to also echo the rabbi to tell them also that they shouldn't listen. It wasn't my feeling on it. My feeling is always if you listen to music, you need the music, and it's good for you, then whatever the case is. So that led into a conversation. Then me and that rabbi ended up meeting. He apologized to me because they didn't necessarily say it the way he said it, but so that was the first time where I started to feel. And I was in Israel for a few years already, maybe 3 or 4 years already. And that was in a very ultra Orthodox community. And of course, then after that, I would have pushback here and there and different things like that. I wouldn't say I got it as bad as there were other artists, there were other people who, but it would usually be like people feel a certain way. And then I go somewhere, they'll meet me and they'll go, oh no, you're totally not the guy. Like I will host meals for Yeshiva Bachram, for, guys who are coming to Israel to learn from America. 30, 40 Bachram. Every Friday night, 40 boys.
I was at one of those.
You was at one of those? Yeah. Were you? Okay. Yeah. So when I will have the boys, there'll be some times where guys will come in and they'll try to like speak in Ebonics. They want to kind of talk like, and then when they realize I don't talk like that, they feel like stupid. You know what I'm saying? Like that type of stuff will happen all the time because you hear in the rap, it has its own language. So people think like automatically you just talk like that. And it's not. It's just like, it turns on when you rap. You see it a lot of times when people come from, they have like a completely English accent, but they're from the Caribbean. And then when they get around their family and then the whole accent is like, hey, wait 1 second. It's like, no, it's not fake. It's authentically me, but it turns on when this happens. So a lot of times people, make that mistake. And so that was happening on a smaller level, but it was happening on a bigger level where people just specifically thought, and there was another rapper, I'm going to say his name, who also, I say what preceded me a little bit before, and he did not, I don't want to say he didn't change as much as me, but there were certain leaves he didn't change over yet. And so another friend had told me like, and I didn't realize it until later, you're going to be constantly looked at in the light of this other person also too. Like, and it's true. People mix it up all the time. So many people are like, man, I love your story. And they start telling me and it's like, it's his story. It's not my story. Like, that's the other guy's story. Like, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, whatever, he's not around here today anymore. So the whole story is just like, you get me mixed up with somebody else. So it's always that as well. People not really knowing who you are. So it's the struggle of being you, being all that you feel that God called you to do, using your unique talents and unique gifts that God gave you, because I'm a communicator, right? And I can communicate to people that other people can't communicate to, and I can do it in a way that other people can't. Some people will appreciate the communication, other people won't, And so because of that, puts you in a tough spot sometimes.
I want to now actually pivot to another aspect of your music career, which is your music has evolved. For the people that have been following your music like myself, big fan, I love your stuff. Some of your videos have been not a typical music video or not a typical song in the Jewish community. Have you ever had certain experiences with some of your music where you might have been influenced by outer forces of people telling you, man, produce your music like this or produce it like that? Have you ever had those situations?
That's a struggle. It was like a repeat of a struggle, that I was telling you before with the record labels and stuff like that. So I'm assuming you're talking about Motherland Bounce. So we're just talking.
For those that don't know, that's
that was such an interesting season for me because there were so many people in my ear at that time. Right after this success, I would say I had with my Lamala album, that were just like, and this is probably why I said what I said before. Everybody has, especially when you're a public figure, they have the best image of you. They look at you and see what you could be for them, right? That'll validate something that would make them feel either more proud about themselves or their Judaism. Like if we had a representation in Black community or in pop culture like this or whatever, and you can be that guy, right? Regardless, I don't care about what you feel for yourself. You could be that guy. Yeah, a little bit too. You should rap more. You should do this. And so I was getting a lot of that from people in my inner circle. As it started to expand, obviously you have more success. So more people are there, more people to do videos, more people to, And so you meet more people along the way. And I've always been very big about staying at houses when I'm on tour. I don't like to be in hotels. I think that's how people get in trouble, hanging out too much, all this stuff. I like being Jewish homes. I'm going to be next to the mikveh. I want to be where there's a place I could go and learn. I want to be in a community always if I can. So I'm not a hotel guy. So because of that, you meet a lot of people along the way. So there's the good and the bad. So sometimes, and I wouldn't even say bad, I don't feel like anybody around me was ill-intentioned around that time in my life. I think everybody genuinely wanted the best, but it just wasn't my best. And so what happened was around that time I did Motherland Bounce. I remember I was in LA and I was riding. My brother-in-law had made the track in LA and we were just riding around freestyling to it. And then I was with another friend of mine, shout out to L'chaim Moji, and we were sitting and I start freestyling to the beat. And that was the one line that everybody remembered, Black and Yiddish, I've been with is Sammy Davis' cousin. Like it came out of my, I was just, like old school cypher style, like rhyming. And so I was like, oh yeah, we got to get back to that song. Like we were having fun. So I was in the studio session one day and then Z comes in. He's like, no, man, what happened to the one song? Like, what happened to the one? So he's like, man, we gotta do that track. And then so for all who love it, I totally blame him. So and so I sat in there. I wrote the song fairly quick, and it was good. It was sort of therapeutic. Because at that time I was dealing with a lot of the, my kids weren't getting into school because of color of their skin. I was dealing with that. I went to Reb Chaim. That was during this whole entire story in Jerusalem. I went to Rabbi who was basically the leader of the Jewish people at that time. And he had beautiful things to say, encouraged me really, really much. So, and the story got out, it leaked. It was an unannounced radio call. That I didn't know that I had released a single around the same time. So I thought they were calling me to talk about the single. And I know Menachem told him he wanted to help. So, but when he called me, then it was about the Reb Chaim picture that went out. Because I only gave half of what was said because I wasn't trying to tell the whole story. But he said something so beautiful that, whoever's running my social media at the time, they put out that statement. So I was like, why did he say that? And then so I started saying it, and then I start trying to pull back, and it was like it snowballed. Within minutes, all of this was on all of the websites and all that, racial discrimination and all that, and it was just such a over. I remember calling Rabbi Weinberger in Woodmere, and I was like, Rebbe, what did I just do? I didn't even mean to. Now people want the story. I had reporters calling me. They really wanted Haaretz. The left media. Everybody wanted that story. The racial discrimination, the rapper, and blah blah blah. And so it was and he gave me good advice. He says, just be quiet. 2 weeks is gonna go away. Just don't say nothing. And that happened. I literally stayed in my house. I barely went out of my house for 2 weeks. I just didn't want to deal with it at all, just because it was such a whatever. But to lie and say that I didn't feel a certain way after going into these meetings, Rebbetzin Berkowitz, she was with us and all that. Rabbi Berkowitz is also very holding our hand during that time, at least. So I ended up, actually writing the song with that frustration in mind, right? So because it wasn't just that. Every time I went to New York, I had people. At the it's a lot of black people that work inside the airports over there, especially in JFK or whatever. I was hearing from them, oh, you white boy, you done changed up. So I'm getting it in both communities that I'm technically belong to. Black communities telling me I'm too white, and I switched up. The Jewish community is telling me I'm too black. Whatever the case is. So I started having this, a little fire. So I wrote the song, just as a way to get that, sort of out. And And so I recorded it, finished it. I don't even think I listened to it back. I was just I was already moved on. I was like, all right, let me get back to the other song I was working on and whatever. So at this time, I was with a label who was underneath the Orchard Sony umbrella, and Sony's marketing department was supposed to originally do the marketing for the label and for the record and everything else. So I signed under those auspices, and at some point that part of the deal broke down between them and Sony. And so I'm like, left with this album. They're like, no, we're still running with it. We're going to do everything. And so now I have this, they're like, we're going to record the album here. So I'm already starting to work. I'm recording records and everything else. So by the time I go to New York for 3 weeks and we're sitting in a beautiful studio, state of the art. And I'm just like, guys, I have an album already. So listen, oh, you already have an album. I was like, yeah, this is what I've been saying. I already got an album, whatever the case is. So then we record a few more songs and we're like, man, we need a single. We need a hit. So like we sat down, everybody sat down inside the room. Mostly everybody in there was not Jewish. And we're listening to all the records. Motherland Bounce comes on. Everybody goes out of their seats. They're like, and me and my brother were looking at each other like, really? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that one? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like we were really like, really? Yeah, And so everyone's like, no, this is the one. We got to put this one out. And I was like, we don't, why not this one? Everybody's like, no, this one's got urgency. We got to, And so whatever, I guess like for me, because it wasn't like my song, I love writing songs that are devoted to my relationship with God, like straight out, one thing I've discovered about myself is that I was put here to not only to inspire other people, not in a vague way. Some people are here and especially when you're a public figure, you have to like do this dance around thing. Like my thing is like God all the way, right? Like that's what God put me in. My biggest song alludes to that, Hashem Elech, right? And I would say that's my most successful song in the sense that leaked into both worlds really. And it was me praising God, openly, a befhasia that we say, right? So it was a public statement of God. And that's what I feel that my mission is to be. So any place in situation that puts me in the situation to like where I have to be covert about it, I start to feel very much so like that's not me, And that's what that song was for me. And then obviously there was the back end. Like people saw, I was like, oh, I can't believe Nissim put out a video. Like, listen, wait. You know what I had to fight to get through that? Like they wanted women dancers. You know what I'm saying? I showed up on the Motherland Bounce song. Yeah. So they wanted women dancers in that song in the video. The only thing I came up with was the concept, like coming to America, right? It was like, how do we spoof this so people don't think like I'm going off the rails crazy? Let's make it fun. Let's make it, Purim was coming up. I was like, let's make it like a thing. And so they're like, nah, we got to get women dancers, man. Shout out to Leon Robinson. I was trying to explain to Leon Robinson is professional actor for many years. I grew up watching his movies. He was an amazing asset, throughout all of this in film, and inspired me even to be more into film. But he trying to explain to him that I did not want female dancers, and like he could not wrap his head around the whole entire idea. And so then I'm like, okay, cool. Dodge that bullet. Show up on set. And I meet all the dancers, all the guys, and whatever the case is, and whatever, so whatever. We show up. I got on my thing. I come out, and these guys ain't got no shirts on, man. They all oiled up. And I'm looking, I'm like, whoa. I said, guys, it's like, no way. Like, so then I go over to the director, like, dude, I can't, no. And it's like, no, they're not women. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And you remind me, I'm a public figure already in the Jewish community. People know who I am. And there's people walking by, taking pictures. There's Nissim Black. And I've got oiled guys standing up behind me with mini skirts on. And
this
I'm
was
like,
in Israel or America?
No, this is in America. This is Harlem. It's a Harlem in Brooklyn. I'm just like, typical day in New York for the regular New Yorker, but for like, Jewish Orthodox guy, just like, what's going on? And so, I mean, I laugh about it now, but I'm telling you, this was a place of pain for me. So my brother-in-law looks at me and he says, listen, just shoot it now. Don't make a fight. He was very smart. Do it now. We'll talk to the rabbi afterwards. So we ended up talking to the rabbi, just like, it was like a no-brainer, right? I go back to the guys. I say, listen, I have the money. I'm going to repay for all the scenes with the guys with the shirts on. I was willing to say it was thousands of dollars. I said, I can't do this. And so the other partner at the label said, listen, I heard about the fight and I heard you told them this ahead of time. He says, don't worry, I'm going to cover it.
Wow.
So we at least reshot it over. Guys put on shirts, whatever. And so, the song comes out. It's successful. It's getting millions of views. And at that point, I'm really also stuck because the label thing is kind of like, we didn't move in. Sony, we didn't get that love from Sony that we thought we were going to get on it because of another situation that they had with the label. But then I had Columbia and Republic and Warner and all these other companies started calling me in, and they're like, and I went to go meet with all of them, and the song's going viral. They want to do a deal, but then it's like this place where I get to in these meetings and guys go like, well, how far can you go? Like, and I've been there, flashback. I was that guy that changed my morals for these type of situations before, not doing it, right? And so, not that far, buddy. You know what I'm saying? And I remember at one point, I was in there, and of course, the two guys there, the head A&R and the other A&R were Jewish guys. So that's like, do you keep Shabbos? Like, yeah. He's like, do you really keep Shabbos? I was like, I really keep the Sabbath. I really do. So, that was an experience. And then, whatever, I parted ways, me and the label, great guys over there, but, we parted ways. And it was just some soul searching and reflection. And I remember like going back just like, man. And there were some people obviously in the Orthodox community that was very like, they didn't know how to receive Motherland Bounce. And the truth is, it was hard for me because I was trying to really push it. But it's hard to push things you're also uncomfortable with. And so after a while, you start to have this breakdown within yourself. It's just like, how can I like really push? And it's not like it was the worst song in the world. Like the song's a banger. I'm not going to lie. The song thumps. You know what I mean? It's not like it's a song that doesn't. It's just not me. You know what I'm saying? And it's not because it's too hip hop. I love hip hop. I love, when it melodic, but there's a way to do it in a way that is still panini, which is still deep. It still has emotion to it that is flowing. And so for me, it didn't check those boxes for me. And so for me, it's kind of always been this thorn in my side. But the way I was able to look at it afterwards, after the smoke cleared from everything, was that, God told Abraham, Ishmael, I'm also going to bless him. Isaac is who I said to do it through. That's the lineage, and that's it. And I always look at Motherland Bounce as my Ishmael. Like, still there's a lot of people who would have never got into any of my other content or my music that is very positive and uplifting if they didn't hear Motherland Bounce, right? It was a blessing for even the other dancers who were on the set because they had opinions about Jews, thinking reflective that Jews didn't like black, like there's like a black Jew. Hold on, you really Jew? They thought we all had on costumes, right? They didn't know like I was really Jewish until after a while they kept on seeing all these Jews come over and take pictures with me, and I was like, oh no, wow! So they were all very excited after that. It gave them a new, look into Jews. So I think it was a overall, it ended up working out, but my music is adored and lifted and changed. And if people are not familiar with it, go listen to those songs. It's the essence of, I think, who I am as an artist.
Wow. First of all, I did not know the background of that, and that was very entertaining. And I want to, channel a little bit more into what you're doing now. And obviously we're here right now in the undisclosed Moral Edge studio. I'm not going to say where the location is, but what is it that wants you to feel connected to obviously the mission that we're doing here, and what is kind of your focus now? Obviously you're still doing music, but what's currently on the table for you right now?
So truthfully, I haven't really recorded in like a year and a half until this. I've been kind of taking a break, started podcasting. So Motherland Bounce eventually led to an HBO deal. I had a deal with Warner to do a TV show. Just ironically, they named it also Motherland Bounce. And it was Sally Richardson, shout out to her. She was amazing, who found me. And I had a few different networks that were interested, Netflix, Queen Latifah, I had whatever, Sally, but Sally was just like, we're doing this show, and I grew up watching her, over the, just as a young kid watching her in a lot of movies, and she was amazing. So it was already kind of like starstruck when she reached out to me. And so that led to us doing a deal with Warner HBO Max for a TV show. And even throughout that, I hit that same thing where it's like, I always get to this place where it's like, and I told my manager this at the time, I said, listen, if what I'm doing is not openly and publicly lauding praise to God, I can only be excited about it for a little bit. At some point, I'm going to wear off because it's not my mission in life. I'm very clear about that. Even if things get murky for a little bit, God always does something to pull me back to like, hey, this is our mission, right? And so at some point when I start to realize that it was going to be hard, there's a writer's room. Moshe Kasher was the writer. And, shout out to Moshe. And by the way, I disagree with all these guys politically and everything else. That's already something to be said, right? Great people. We just have different political views and probably the way that we see the world. Moshe and I, went back and forth a lot on the writing, which is okay, because if I'm arguing with just one guy, we'll hash it out, and this is part of, But then I think him and Sally told me, it's going to go into a writer rooms, and there's going to be 10 Hollywood writers after episode 3. And I'm like, whoa, I'm going to have to argue with 10 Moshes? What I'm saying? What am I doing? And then at that point, I was just like, okay, Shim, you got to work something out. This is just not going to work in this type of way. And I've always wanted, Columbia Pictures, Netflix, Jay and there have been many people who reached out to me for my story I'm saying on a massive scale. So that indicates to me I have one. Maybe I should be the first person to tell that. You know what I'm saying? And that with the proper visuals, whether in whatever way. And so I started to feel that way. So it just so worked out through divine providence. First things, the writers went on strike. And then from then, the October 7th unfortunately happened, which, the show was supposed to be shot here in Israel. I had a non-relocation clause in the contract. So when they wanted to move it, I just decided I didn't want to do the show. And so it took me back to the drawing board, and I realized that, I could tour and be away from my family for a third of the year and think that that's going to be okay, and think I'm going to be married when I get back, because it ain't going to work. I got 7 kids at home and it work out. So I need to still do what it is that God gave me to do. I need to be effective and inspire and spread my mission. But at the same time, I cannot be away from my family as much as I've been. So I sort of took a step back from music. I still tour and I go out and whatever, but a lot less. Started focusing more on my whiskey brand. I released a whiskey during that time. And so I started working on that again. And then, I had this vision, hooked up with Michael Gerbitz, and like, listen, I want to do, I have this podcast, but I want to tell visuals. I want to build a streaming platform. And we started, hashing this out. He and I had a lot of the same ideas. That's how Moral Edge was birthed. And that's what we've been doing now, building Moral Edge, building a beautiful catalog of film and documentaries and podcasts and entertainment that is focused on bringing moral clarity into the world, especially in a time right now where most of the world is very murky and foggy when it comes to morality. So that's the now.
Listen, I'm pumped to be on the same team together with you and to obviously do things. And the fact that you joined me for the show, I'm very, very appreciative. And your story has been really inspiring. And I hope it gives people a little bit of an insight into more of who you are. So obviously check out the Nissim Black show if you haven't. The final question I'm going to ask to you, and this could be related to anything we discussed today or whatnot, but if anybody, whoever's listening to this episode, wherever they're at in life, if you had one message that was like, take this message with you, keep it in your pocket with you for the rest of your life, what would that be?
My message would be is that everything that you need, everything that you're ever going to need is already by you, right? So we are put into this world. Every person is given a mission. Every person has a task. We're all supposed to complete something while we're here. And everybody feels it. That's why everybody struggles with it. So we all have times we feel empty and we feel hopeless and we feel all this, which is a reflection of a lack of connection to God. But ultimately, it's a lack of connection to ourselves. Because what's the connection to God? It reminds us of who we are and what we are to be doing while we're here. So I think my message that I would give people is, before looking outside, look inside, right? I think looking inside, not enough people spend enough time with themselves. Everybody wants music on as soon as they get in the car. They want to be, full of noise and things going on around them because we don't want to think. We don't want to, deal and face with, some of our demons, as many would say. But only in wrestling with those things and with your inner thoughts and who you are, only that way you're going to be able to realize, wow, I have a bag of goodies, right? And I can really change the world with what I have.
That is phenomenal advice. And really, just sometimes you got to look within.
Right.
Well, a lot of people are just trying to look outside and just turn around, look at the mirror.
It's there already. It's already there.
Exactly. Nissim, you are phenomenal.
Thank you, brother.
This was a phenomenal conversation. And just really, as I start off with a thank you, I'm going to end off with a thank you. You're a very busy person. And the fact that you've been here for probably a little over an hour or so I'm thankful. So looking forward to our next episode. And thanks for joining me.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening to my conversation today with Nissim. I hope you took a little bit of inspiration from him. And if there's one thing that I had to take away from this episode that hopefully we could all put into our life, is that at the end of the day, just like I pointed out to Nissim in the episode, if you really want something in life, you just gotta get it. Nissim spent so much time of his life just searching for true purpose and true meaning. And thank God he found it in Judaism and all of his service of God. And if that's something we could take for ourselves, just put all the effort we can into something we believe. Hopefully we'll be successful in whatever we're trying to pursue. Thank you guys so much for staying with me this week. And we'll see you guys in next week's episode. All the best.